call the meeting to order. Let the meetings reflect that all board members were present, with the exception to Mr. James, who had an obligation with his daughter, so maybe joining us a little bit later. And so item 5 tonight is public comments related to agenda items. Any public comments tonight? No public comments. Thank you. All right, item 6, consent agenda. This is holdover items that were tabled from the last meeting. Dr. Duplessis. I'm sorry, no presentation by you. Forgive me. So you have the consent agenda here in front of you.
You're going to do it anyway.
What a trooper. Not that I would put you on the spot, but you can return the favor anytime.
Okay.
So this would be approval of the finance report as well as the vendors related to books and related media. You guys had a chance to review that. Any questions or comments? If not, I would need a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved, Chad Collins.
Second.
Second, Jeff Wood. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item 7. Now, Dr. Duplessis, you're up. Target percentage attendance report, better known as taper adjustment.
Good evening. Thank you, President Owens and Board of Trustees and everyone here. We have an update for you this evening in regards to our attendance rate, or what might have formerly been known as a hold harmless, for the current year. So I guess at the state level, their ears were burning when we met last, and the morning after, they made an announcement from the governor's office related to attendance adjustments for the current year. So we don't talk about them in terms of hold harmless anymore, and I'll explain why shortly. But this is a target percentage attendance rate adjustment, or TPAR adjustment, that they have announced. So I kind of wanted to give you just a brief update on some of the things that have occurred throughout the year and what the most recent announcement means to us. So back in October, we shared a little bit about the effect of enrollment and attendance for Lovejoy compared to our adopted budget. And at that point in time, we shared that we could have a loss just projected at that time of roughly $529,000 based on a lowered enrollment as well as an attendance rate used in the budget process at 97%. And so we were kind of tracking this throughout the year, and then the announcement was made or shared that, again, no hold harmless would be allowable as it was used in the past because of legislative action. So anything that would be done in this current year would not help us with enrollment issues, but there might be something to help us with attendance rates based on COVID. So we did get an announcement about a TPAR adjustment, which I'll call Rev 1 as the first kind of announcement that was made. And that was relative to the first 6 weeks only of this current school year. And because the attendance rate across the state was low for every district as school started, they were looking at just adjusting that first 6 weeks back to a rate of either the first 6 weeks a couple years ago or the last 18 weeks of this current school year. The last 18 weeks of this current school year, of course, started in January. So when Omicron hit and across the state, attendance rates were low again. The state said, well, we're going to have to look at this again. So in February, the House Public Ed Committee sent a letter to TEA recommending a hold harmless, and the calculations that they suggested using for that would have resulted in a projected increase in revenue for Lovejoy of a little over $570,000. And that was based on an 18-19 attendance rate adjustment. So shortly after that, action was taken on March 29th. It does not perfectly match with the recommendation from the House Public Ed Committee. The calculation is just a little bit different. But essentially that announcement from the governor was on March 29th, and then shortly TEA started sharing their calculations and how they would apply this adjustment. So I'm calling it TPAR Rev 2. Affectionately, I'm hoping for a Rev 3, but right now this is only affecting the first 4-6 weeks of our current year. The first 4-6 weeks of our current year, our attendance rate was 94.1%. The cumulative attendance rate of the first 4-6 weeks of 2019-20 is 96.54%. And that is the adjusted percentage rate that they will use for our enrollment for those first 4-6 weeks. So if you calculate that out, it's about a $560,000 increase in revenue compared to the last projection that we shared with you at the last board meeting. a little bit, about $10,000 less than what would have been calculated based on the House Public Ed Committee letter, but not significant. And again, this does not impact the last 2 6-week periods of this current year. We just started the six weeks. This will not affect the fifth or sixth 6 weeks. So there are no adjustments in place yet for that period of time. So of course, you're going to hear us continue to stress the importance of attendance because we are not under a TPAR adjustment right now or for the remainder of the year, but we will have the benefit of this to offset some of what we thought might be coming this year. So as we continue to take in more information as we get it from the state and make any other adjustments based on changes in the budgeting process, we'll bring forward a full updated projection model for you at the next board meeting when we have our budget workshop.
Curious, what would the timing be? Decisions made and we know definitively this is what we're getting. Do you know about when we would actually receive those funds or?
That's a good question. So it will be typically in your final settle up. So it will be later during the summer when we actually receive the funds.
How has this changed the projection? You originally projected 560K down, and now we're looking at maybe 560K up. There's been that much of a swing between revision 1 and revision 2.
The revision 1 and 2 of the projection. So the base projection that we shared last board meeting did not have an adjustment in it. The base plus a projection that we shared baked in that what we estimated a hold harmless could be or a TPAR adjustment could be for the current year.
It was never a negative, always a positive.
I'm sorry.
From 70 to 70.
My apology. Yes, it's always
Okay.
positive.
Okay.
My apologies.
No worries.
But if they did nothing, we were projecting a loss of 529,760.
Right. And we've kind of adjusted that. And that was our October estimate. We've been tracking the attendance rate. The 5th 6 weeks, as an example, we were at about 95%, just a little under that as a whole. So each 6 weeks, we kind of refine that. We've been refining that projection based on actual rates.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8, still the winner. Long-range energy plan.
Yes. So this evening I wanted to bring up a topic that I was kind of in the back of my mind since I've been here, but in Lovejoy ISD, we have not necessarily had a long-range energy plan that we've had published. So this was something that we wanted to take a closer look at. So I wanted to share some information with you on the long-range energy plan. We have had an agreement in place with a company called Ideal Impact for energy savings. So we also wanted to review that program. And lastly, discuss some potential opportunities for future that we're still evaluating in terms of power factor correction. And then just kind of clearly lay out the next steps. Of course, this is all somewhat preliminary information, but the purpose of energy management in schools is really that it is the largest portion of our budget after payroll. So when we talk about trying to find efficiencies and opportunities for savings, this is a place I often try to look to see if there's something that we can do to have an impact. So a typical school district budget, up to 29% of the M&O budget can be utilities, so it can be significant. It's also the highest controllable and non-strategic cost. Typically, if we're saving utilities, people aren't too upset about it and they might not even notice. And so it's a pretty easy target. SECO, the State Energy Conservation Office, used to estimate that about 25% of school district energy use was wasted. And this was several years ago. So we continue to look at items like this for savings opportunities. And further, there's been some legislation over the years related to energy use in public buildings and specifically school districts. In 2007, House Bill 3693 passed, required school boards to adopt a goal to reduce their electricity consumption by 5% a year for 6 years, beginning in 2007. There were a lot of folks that have been working in the energy conservation space for several years, and at that time thought, how in the world are we going to do 5% a year every year for 6 years? That's a significant amount of reduction. So in 2009, Senate Bill 300 passed and substituted the use of a long-range energy plan instead of requiring that 5% reduction goal to be continued. In 2011, House Bill 1728 was passed and refined the definition of the measures that we put in place in our long-range plan. It gives some kind of guidance around design, construction, making sure these items are included in your long-range energy plan in some way. It also kind of got codified into board policy CL as it relates to a recycling program that school districts generally are required to participate in some type of waste management or recycling program. We do have an exemption as a district of less than 10,000 students. So if you're small enough or it poses an economic hardship, you can apply for a waiver from TEA from this board policy, but we have not done that. So Education Code 4492 is where all this came about. And so we're looking at how we need to be reducing our electricity consumption in compliance with our energy plan. So I was looking for our energy plan. There are strategies for achieving this at low cost or no cost, but the way that the code reads, we should be evaluating anything that has a 7-year or less payback. So as we review these items, we have generated a draft long-range energy plan because we did not have one in place. And so that's been attached to the board book for your review. I just wanted to hit some of the highlights of that plan. So while the policy can be pretty general, there's supposed to be specific goals and strategies outlined within the plan. These are the 7 kind of topics that we've identified, or strategies, so to speak. One is tracking utility cost and usage, generating awareness, facility use guidelines, recycling and waste management, purchasing of energy efficient equipment, exploring opportunities for further efficiency, and a green team. So we've kept it, while we've identified some very specific strategies, the plan is also general enough to be adaptable each year to what we might be able to achieve in any given year. So the importance of tracking and reporting utility costs, this actually used to be a requirement for several years. In fact, it was just repealed 2 years ago that we had to post our electricity cost and consumption, all of that on our website. That requirement no longer exists, but the purpose of that was really to make sure that districts are actually reviewing those bills. It's not uncommon to find errors or inefficiencies or leaks, things of that nature. So it's definitely something that's beneficial for the district to review that data as opposed to just continually paying the bill. Administration guidelines, so how we operate our schools, how we use them, are one of the things that we want to look at. We want to provide guidelines to teachers. It's usually super simple things like if you have a light switch when you leave the room, turn the light switch off. Keep your eyes open for waste opportunities. We do centrally schedule a lot of our items, so we kind of take care of that for people. But again, like we would anything else, we want to model positive behavior throughout the district. Student guidelines, again, very similar type of things. Facility use guidelines. So you'll see in the plan that's in your book that we've listed out kind of what our normal operating parameters are within the district, what our practices are, what our temperature sets are, how we handle things like leaks, how do we investigate those, and all of the items. It also provides some guidance to not only staff members, but outside entities that might want to use the facilities and what the procedures are for that. We also rely heavily on our custodians to help us as they go throughout the buildings, making efficient measures that they can, and then just observing and reporting anything that we need to attend to. Our maintenance team has a large part to do with this, so they not only perform preventative maintenance to keep our equipment in efficient working order, changing air filters, doing things that optimize the use of that equipment. Our recycling program, we do recycle in our facilities. So we not only have trash pickup, we obviously have recycling pickup. So we're doing some things in that area. And then while we don't have a whole lot of design and construction going on in our district, we do want to make sure that when we purchase equipment, like if we're replacing an HVAC unit or something of that nature, that we are looking at not only the first cost, but the life cycle cost of that equipment, and if we're making efficient determinations for buying. And last is a district-wide committee or green team. Most districts have some type of group, and so we've had some discussions about starting something of this nature, so we kind of have a framework in place in the plan for doing so. The benefit of that is really being able to get kind of more eyes and ears and hands to do the work of looking at what opportunities we may have and what we may be able to implement. And so the purpose of this is really to just align with our purpose, goals, and strategies. And I couldn't help but put this picture up here because this is from about 15 years ago. I did not make this. Uh, but we had a very creative teacher who came up with this slogan and kind of posted it throughout their campus as just a fun reminder. We do not encourage this type of behavior, but we do want to be efficient with our decisions. So you will see the plan drafted in your board book and linked here. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. But essentially, this is a plan that the district is required to have and is required to have the board adopt a plan. And so we would like to bring this forward for approval at the next board meeting.
Questions?
I have one question. So you know how we look at attendance, we say 1% up or down, what does that mean
Mhm.
from a financial standpoint? Do you have any idea, like if I'm not advocating changing the temperature in our buildings, but 1% either way, does that have a big influence dollar wise to consider, or? And there
That's
may
a
be
great question.
reasons for having a certain temperature because it's better for the learning environment. So I'm not advocating one way or the other. Just curious.
And I'm going to touch on a couple of other items here. One is our agreement with Ideal Impact, which has some of those parameters within it. But that's a great question. My philosophy for doing this for over 20 years is less about the temperature in the space when it's occupied. We do want to be consistent with that, and we do want to provide an optimal learning environment. And so typically a degree here or there, as long as we're not doing competing where like that unit's heating and this one's cooling, as long as we're in a reasonable time for our reasonable separation between units, we're usually not negatively impacting our cost or our efficiency so much. To me, the maximum amount is gained when the facility is not occupied. So my philosophy has always been, let's make people comfortable within normal acceptable parameters when they're in the space. And then let's just try to make sure that when we're not using it, that we've done a good job of creating processes and procedures where we're turning things off when we don't need them, because that's going to give us the maximum amount of savings.
Okay.
But that's a good question. We get that a lot. But we do operate under certain parameters. We have a partnership, the district does, with Ideal Impact. And so this organization came in and did some optimization. So this program doesn't involve a lot of, equipment change outs or things like that. It's really an overlay of the energy management system that has a lot of algorithms that helps optimize your programming for HVAC equipment and things like that. They provide some recommendations for some additional items. So I think I can read on there the total project savings to date. This has been in place for, I think, 6 or 7 years. Our average monthly savings has been about $10,000, a little more than that. So you can see some of the information that's shared here on the performance of that program. So the first chart you'll see on the upper left is our consumption over time. So for the past 4 years, you can see what the target that Ideal Impact had for us in terms of kWh electricity consumption saved versus our target. We certainly have had savings every year. We haven't always made our target, but we have always saved. On the right side, you'll see that cumulative savings year over year to date by energy component. So many years ago, we just talked about kilowatt hours, which is our electricity consumption. But since deregulation, our TDSP or transportation and distribution type of fees on our bills have become such a larger portion of that we look at things like our KW, our peak demand, our KVAR, to see what other opportunities there are for savings outside of just consumption, but our peaks and the way that we schedule our buildings and some of those items. So what Ideal Impact does, if we do not achieve the savings that they have put into the contract for any given year, they essentially pay us back any shortfall so that we can make our payment to them each year. We are projecting that by next year, here's some additional information on the savings and where it's coming from. You can see the breakdown of each of the components. But we are expecting that next year we will be complete with the program. So if you kind of follow the overview of the payments and the savings over time, the way this contract was initially set up when it was created, was that once the district achieved a cumulative amount of savings to cover the cost of the project, we would no longer make a payment for the project. The full amount of the savings would come back to the district and we wouldn't have a payment to the company anymore. We do still use their system for optimizing our energy management system, so we could continue to use that after next year for a nominal fee on an annual basis. So that's kind of why we wanted to evaluate this and see how it was performing. And then obviously we would be looking at what budgetary impact it would have next year when we would be able to potentially discontinue this program if we achieve the full savings that we're expecting.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
I remember being on the board when this was approved, but I was really new. So it was kind of like, whatever's happening is happening. Are there competitors to Ideal Impact, or what is your experience as far as, have you dealt with them or have you dealt with someone comparable? Like, I'm curious more about like that.
In all transparency, the gentleman who started Ideal Impact hired me out of college on my first job that ended up being at Schneider Electric. So there is a lot of activity in the energy space, regardless of industry, but there are several companies that do different types of energy savings work for school districts. So that's a very fair question. Some of them are more equipment renovation-based programs where you're going to come in and take all your HVAC units off, replace them with new ones, replace your water meters, things like that for cities. And they build a program around that. One thing I do like about the Ideal Impact program is it uses what you already have in place, kind of from an optimization standpoint. I've been able to do some of those programs in-house in districts where I had more staff that we could take that on. But it's often very hard for small districts to have the staff in place to kind of constantly be evaluating these types of things. So it does offer us an opportunity to have that. Of course, I'm looking forward to not making the payment anymore.
Right. Yes, of course.
But it's definitely been effective. And I will say from a contractual standpoint, the fact that they have stayed true to their contract, which stated they did have to write us a check at one point. The first year there was a shortfall and they did stick with that. So
it looks like unless I'm misreading this, the real benefit of this is beyond the contract and we continue to use the system for a nominal fee, but thus far it's been at or near a break even
correct.
versus savings versus fee.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I don't know what man hours went into implementing a system like this to invest that kind of money for a nominal break even. We could have probably, I'm not sure if that's the best use of our time or not.
Well, and some districts will do the way that our contract, from what I understand, the way that it was set up was intentional because we didn't have the upfront capital to do it. So they designed it so that we were only paying what we saved, whereas some contracts are set up where you could achieve a higher savings than what you paid, but you might have paid up front and made your own, financing arrangements, things like that. I've been in districts, like I said, where we've been able to implement some of those things without having as much of it, capital outlay to another group. So
our intention going forward is to utilize their software for whatever the nominal fee is and beyond this contract to realize the real dollars of those savings.
that's correct.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions about that, I wanted to just share one other opportunity that we are looking at. So as we listed out all of our strategies in the long range energy plan, and actually as we were meeting with Ideal Impact and reviewing some of the utility bill information, I noticed that we had poor power factor at Lovejoy High School and Pusser Elementary. And really, it's potentially that we could have low power factor at other buildings. It just happens that these two buildings are on Encore. So they actually list this because they charge a penalty or an additional tariff if your power factor is too low. So power factor is essentially a measurement of the electrical efficiency of the distribution to your building and how efficiently you're using it in the facility. Really from a perspective of motor use and things like that, the more inductive motors you have, the lower your power factor is. So these are our two facilities that are operating below 95%. School buildings can range anywhere from 80 to 100. The penalty can be pretty steep. So the solution to power factor problems is pretty simple. It's installing a capacitor bank at the point of your main electrical panels. So it looks like that. It's this little box that sits in there with a bank of capacitors that helps improve your power factor so that you don't get those fees on your electricity bill. So that's just something that we're looking at to evaluate. Actually, we have a gentleman coming on site tomorrow to do some assessments to see if that's something that would benefit. Typical payback for power factor is 5 years or less. So it does have a quicker payback than some of the other items that we can look at.
You said that was just at the high school in Buster.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
But you're still not sure at Hart and the others because they're on a different
Right.
utility provider who doesn't report the power factor.
That's
Is that
correct.
what's going on?
That's correct. And because we're not charged a penalty at those other locations because they're on the cooperative, they actually sometimes have it written into their tariff. They just don't deploy it. So until they do, there's really no financial benefit to doing a power factor correction. And frankly, it helps the utility company, it doesn't really help the district to change our power factor. So where we go from here, the next steps for that are, again, the long-range energy plan will be back before you at the regular board meeting. We'll continue to assess the ideal impact savings, hoping that we achieve what we need to achieve to complete our contract close to the end of this time next year. And then looking at power factor to see if that's an opportunity to correct that. And that is all of the energy items that I wanted to bring before you and answer any questions that you may have.
So the tariffs for the lack of efficiency, for lack of better words, have we been paying those tariffs up to this point?
Yes.
What's the substance of that?
So we're looking at a potential savings of $30,000-$40,000 a year if that's what the assessment, once it's complete, proves out.
$2,000 to $3,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cost of capital to add those?
We're looking at probably a little over $50,000. Again, it kind of fluctuates. Our savings could be anywhere from 10 to 20, 25,000 in that range. The cost then that's how much more capacitors you would have to purchase. So the cost would be somewhere in that range as well. The company that we're looking at, the reason why I asked them to come in and assess it is because they'll do a guarantee of the capacitor banks for the term to achieve the savings. So that you know that you'll have the capacitors in place to achieve the full payback.
So in lieu of these offsets, the other option would be upgrading equipment and infrastructure to have more efficient and more productive infrastructure versus having this offload bank to basically shield power load.
Yes, so you could redesign your entire HVAC system for your building. I mean, back in the day, we used to have people do thermal storage, right? Where you had a whole building that created cool water and waited until the daytime to push it through the building. But really our tariffs aren't set up in that way anymore. Just the capital cost of redesigning, it's a lot cheaper to adjust for the power factor at the site. And it's really, it's HVAC in major buildings. You're always going to have some
It's all
manner of
three
inductive
phase in our
load.
buildings, right?
Hmm?
It's all three phase in our
Mhm.
buildings.
Yes. Except for this morning.
Except for what? You said except for what?
This morning we lost one phase at part of admin, so. But Grayson got us back up and running.
Thank you. All right. Item 9, transportation plan. Mr. Parker.
Good evening. I just wanted to give you an update. As you know, we started this year a fee to ride buses for transportation. If you requested that, I wanted to kind of give you where we stood, what our expenditures were, what our fees were that we've collected so far to date. So if you'll remember back at the May 24th board meeting, May 24th, 2020 board meeting, it was proposed that we would charge $350 per rider, and we would have different levels of riders. Of course, if you're going to ride both AM and PM before and after school, it would be $350 per rider. We also offer the options of if you wanted to just ride AM or just ride PM, it would be 80% of the full fee, 80% of the $350. We also offered a shuttle service between campuses. So if you wanted your child, if your child went to Willow Springs, you wanted to pick them up at Hart Elementary, you wanted to pick them up at Buster, they could shuttle over, and that would be 60% of the full fee. And then we capped all of the fees off per family at $700. According to that board meeting, our estimated cost of these fees would offset our transportation cost by would be approximately $225,000. So that's just kind of to catch you up and remind you where we kind of started this journey. Our fees, as you can see, we offered 3 different payment types. You can pay by the year, and this is the breakdown if you want, depending on which service you want. You can pay by semester, or you can pay by the month. The month was just because the numbers didn't add up quite perfectly. Paying by the month was just a little bit more expensive than if you were to pay by a semester. And then by the numbers, here's how many total riders we've had. This number changes daily because we have people adding, or not so much adding anymore, but in the middle of the year, we had people adding as we provided more routes, as we acquired more drivers. We also had people drop off throughout the year too. So this number fluctuated. But in total, this year we've had 1,461 riders. You can see we've had 87 shuttle riders, AM and PM only. You can see those numbers. And then total, if you wanted to ride both, we've had 1,002 riders who chose, or families who chose their kids to ride both AM. And then by grade level, you can see our 5th, 6th, and 7th graders. That's where the majority of our riders have, majority of our population of riders, how old they are. As you can imagine, the older you get, the fewer riders we have. So what does all this mean? How did we budget for this? How much have we spent? You can see on the left column, this is how much money we budgeted for the year. As you would expect, the largest portion of our budget went to personnel cost, which was almost $800,000. If you'll go down a few lines, you can see that gas and diesel is also budgeted at a pretty high number because of the cost of fuel. As on the right-hand side, this is how much we've spent to date out of those budgeted amounts. Our fuel costs are rising rapidly because our cost of diesel has almost doubled since August of last year. I'll show you a little bit more on that in just a little bit. The formatting on this kind of got mixed up from just because when we captured it, but you can see on our fees collected year to date, we've collected just over $403,000. And if we collect what we anticipate to collect over the next 2 months, we're collecting additional $10,000 for a total amount of fees collected of $413,033. If you go back to that $225,000 that we anticipated, we're actually going to collect about $188,000. So what are our challenges when it comes to transportation? Let me go backwards just a second. I did not put this because I've gathered a little bit more information, thanks to Dr. Duplessis, since I loaded this. Last year, we received some funding from the state for transportation. It all depends on the number of riders, the number of routes, the length of the routes. Last year from the state, because we had fewer routes, fewer riders, we collected $136,643. We submit those numbers to the state in, I think it was November, and we anticipate, and it's not going to be final until we actually get the money, but we anticipate collecting around $286,000 this year of state funding for transportation as well. So that is not included in these numbers.
Is that like a grant that we have to apply for, or
It's not a grant.
that's
It's
always
just-
happened?
It's just state funding.
Oh, I never knew
I
that.
don't think it's always happened though. This was the new house bill that allotted us new transportation funds. We used to not get anything, right? I think we used to not get anything.
We used to get nothing.
I recall we didn't get anything for
Yeah.
a while.
So I think this is a new legislative update.
But some of our challenges, of course, continued bus driver shortage. I know our Donna Holden, Johnny Canna, and Bruce Coachman have done a great job of recruiting drivers. We started off, I know when I came on board in this position, back in October and November, we had close to 100 students on our waiting list. And we have 0 on there now. So we've been able to add more routes, more drivers to be able to provide the service to our students. Bus driver compensation, we're still doing, we're looking into how we can become more competitive and make sure that we retain the drivers at a higher rate so they don't go to other districts and we continue, because really we've had some drivers in this district for a long time. Our kids get used to seeing them on the routes, and they're just like the teachers in our district. We want to keep the bus drivers as steady as we can. Working in this district. We have had a mechanic position that was vacated in November. It has been extremely difficult to find another decent mechanic to come. Not just for Lovejoy, but that's just the industry. As we know it right now. So we're having to outsource some of those services that we wouldn't typically have to outsource. Early release days at Lovejoy, those provide a little bit of a logistical challenge for us, and that bus drivers are running 3 routes on those days instead of 2. They run the morning, they run the high school students in the middle of the day, and then they run K-8, I guess it would be, on their normal routes when we do those early release days at the high school. The collection of unpaid bus fees, as you can imagine, we'd love for everybody to pay on time. That doesn't happen every month. So there are a lot of man hours that go into some emails, phone calls, reminding people to pay their bus fees each and every month. So that is paying by the month is one of the challenges that we have in transportation. And just like we said, the fuel prices have almost doubled since the fall semester, since August. So we're paying a much higher price for diesel. So what are we considering going forward into the next year? One of the considerations is on our campus-to-campus shuttle services for our parent paid. So the students, families who ride. This does not include our staff students on the shuttles, but just our parent paid shuttle. Parent paid students who ride the shuttles. We use 2 bus drivers just to run those shuttles. So those are 2 bus drivers that we can't put on routes. Therefore, we're offering fewer routes because we're offering those shuttles. We can still get those kids home. We just, if we discontinue those shuttle services, we just offer that service from campus to campus.
So if you took the 2 bus drivers from the shuttle routes and you create more routes, does that mean that kids get home sooner?
Potentially, yes.
Riding the bus less?
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay.
So that 87 number of shuttle riders does not include staff kids.
That is correct.
Okay.
There's one bus driver that does this, the staff shuttle. 2 bus drivers do the parent paid shuttle. We offer right now, like I mentioned earlier, a semester. You can pay by the semester or annually. I would say that it would be in our best interest to eliminate the monthly payments just because of the man hours that it takes to collect the payment. It's not that they don't want to pay, it's just they need a reminder to pay, right? So I would say by the semester or annually would be our best route to go for payments for the bus services. We would also like to consider deadlines for signing up for transportation. So this year we kept the window of if you wanted transportation, you could sign up at any point in time throughout the semester, throughout the year. That created this waiting list that we had that we were always trying to meet the demand. The problem that may have caused is if we got a bus driver in the middle of the year, let's say in October, we might have to alter the bus routes to add more students. So a student who might have been, before we hired that driver, might have been at the beginning of a route. We changed the routes. They are now at the end of the route. So they might be on the bus another 25, 30 minutes just because we hired another. So just all because we changed up the route. So one of the considerations that we would have would be open up a window for registration for transportation up until, let's say, the 3rd week of July, cut it off, and we go ahead and create bus routes for the entire first semester. At the end of the first semester, we open up a window for the 2nd semester, but we keep everything as is for the entire first semester until we get ready to open up for the 2nd semester. And that helps us with our planning, that helps us with our service, that helps with families who, they're expecting their kiddo to get home at 3:30. They have extra after-school activities that plan out at 4 o'clock, and they can stay on that schedule. If we switch that up in October and now they don't get home until 3:55 because we've switched up routes, that causes frustration, which I completely understand. And then finally, we would like to put out some communication by the end of this school year, by the end of May, on what our transportation services are going to be. So we'll be able to bring I'll be able to bring that plan out in May, what our plan is for each one.
We're gonna mention something about diesel and fuel costs.
Yeah, just that we started off paying at the beginning of this year, $2.43 per gallon for fuel. We purchase about 1,800 gallons every 2 weeks. Right now, we're paying almost $4.50 per gallon. So it's almost double.
How are we 70,000 below budget on that line item for the year? We're about to not be? Is that what you said?
She said we over.
We over budgeted and we're about to close the gap on that.
We over budgeted?
We were, yeah, but we're about to close the gap.
So the staffing shortages as far as bus drivers, that's ongoing, or that's what has been our challenge, continues to be?
It continues to be, yes.
Okay.
I think that I was over at the transportation office just the other day, and we had 2 people come in asking if we're still looking for drivers. The answer to that is absolutely. And we asked them to apply. Of course, we're not going to go in and change routes in April for the remainder of the year, but they're also looking for a bus driving route next year too. So we've been signed up right now.
Where are we on bus inventory?
We're good on busing.
Like, do we have more buses than we need or we're good?
No, I don't think we have more buses than we need. We have enough buses for our routes, and we also have a few extra buses in the event that we might need to take field trips. We have athletics after school, but we don't have more buses.
So last year we got a grant, we'd applied for to purchase some additional buses. Is that an ongoing annual grant we can apply for? Was that a one-time deal?
I'll have to look into that. It's a one-time deal. It's on.
So as we're monitoring the aging of our buses and the quality of those, somebody on top of that.
How is the money from the state calculated? I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get my head around that. Because I don't want to get too excited and count on those dollars, but I'm curious like what the levers are.
Well, it's the mileage of the routes and the
Okay.
number of students who we're servicing.
It's fairly predictable.
And so it is, and we turn all of those in, and it also goes a little bit off the number of buses that we have too. And so if you will look back at, oh, I don't have those, I'm sorry, I have them.
I know we didn't project 1,400 riders initially. I don't, or at least I don't, let me back up. That number doesn't seem what we projected that we would have riding.
Right, because we projected whatever the number of riders would have been at $225,000.
Right.
So we have way more riders than what we initially.
Okay.
That's right.
Last year, LP or PP and LP were 200 something thousand, only got 80,000 roughly. So I think, they rely on the figures that we provided them. That 200 is maybe accurate now that we have our riders.
Right.
That's true. And remember last year, we had cut our bus service down dramatically because
Right.
so the numbers that I turned in November, I got to compare those to the previous years. And they were obviously, because of the dollar amount that we're getting this year, it was considerable.
I appreciate the attention to this because I know if we can't get them here, we can't educate them right. So I know it's been challenging. So
Well, and two, one of the unexpected benefits obviously is the amount of traffic on our campuses. If we would have 1,400 more kids in the car lanes, right? And we don't have infrastructure out here, road lines, traffic lights, to be able to handle So we need more kids to ride buses.
Do we anticipate the ridership to be similar next year? Is that what we're estimating?
We don't have any reason to believe that. I mean, like I said, we had a waiting list this year. So we could have serviced, if we had the number of bus drivers that we needed, we could have serviced that sometime. And our fees collected, we just didn't have bus drivers.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I like the idea of changing the payment system as far as if we can have some reliable expectation for families that are bus riders, because I cannot imagine how frustrating that would be to think your kid's home at one time, have enrolled them in whatever program after school, and then they're not home. Just the angst that would cause, you're already maybe anxious if your child is young and they're on a bus. And so I think that's great. And then I don't want our people chasing money if we don't have to be doing that every month. That would be just a lot of, there's other things we can be doing to help and touch
9
kids.
times out of 10, it's
So-
just an email. Hey, this is just a reminder to pay. They just forgot.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it, are you chasing,
Yeah.
sending to is they're making a phone call. Just never mind.
But I think that's great, because if it keeps things a little more intact, and then if you want to change your mind and after the semester, I think that's really good. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. All right, Anna, contract timeline on 10.
Good evening. Next month, we will be bringing contract recommendations to you. And this will be for professional contracts recommendations. So that'll be at the April 25th board meeting. We need to do it by May 13th. The 10 days before the last day of instruction. So that's why we're recommending at the end of April, which I think is a little bit earlier than we've done in the past. So I'm excited about that. Also, just know our penalty-free resignation deadline. Back this past summer, House Bill 2519 changed that a little bit, and it gave more flexibility and lesser sanctions to teachers for penalty-free resignation. That's 45 days before the first day of instruction, which for us will be July 1st. It's a little bit earlier. Usually it's around July 4th or 5th. And also, but they can't resign more than 30 days or in between the 30th day notice before the first day instruction, which is July 16th. And all of that became effective March 3rd, 2022. Questions about contract recommendations? Okay, we'll see those next month.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Cordell, strategic planning update. On stuff.
Good evening, board. I am excited to share a strategic planning update with you. We successfully accomplished day 3 of strategic planning last week. And we all know that our excellence is by design, so that intentional coming together and designing a strategy and a plan is of critical importance as we look to the future. We, of course, have grounded this work in our mission and our core values, as well as our graduate profile. And we are so excited about committing to our legacy of excellence, supporting future-ready students, and achieving that financial sustainability. You will recall when I joined Lovejoy ISD in June, I shared 3 focus areas: legacy of excellence, future-ready students, and financial sustainability. Very proud of the work that we have done over the last several months in each of these areas, and you will very much see that all 3 of them show up within our strategic plan. You and our community have seen these before: our strategic planning priorities and our strategic planning principles. So I won't read through each of those individually, but I will say I'm very proud of the committee and the way they very much work in alignment with these priorities and these principles. We feel very accomplished because we took care of meeting 1, meeting 2, and meeting 3 on April 5th and accomplished everything that we set out to do together. On April 5th, we came together and we looked at our strategic targets, our strategies, and then really hardwired our key indicators, which is how we will measure our progress, finalized the draft recommendation of the scorecards, and then talked about what comes next. And tonight I'll cover what comes next as well. We defined excellence as part of this work. We talk about our legacy of excellence a lot. And so our legacy of excellence working group thought it would be very important for us to have a shared definition of excellence. And you'll see that there, which is successfully identifying and providing high-quality opportunities in order to maximize and grow each stakeholder. We thought that this was so important that we really lifted this definition up at the beginning of our work on April 5th and made sure that all of our working groups had this in mind as they finalized those scorecards. As part of this, we also had a reminder from Gerald Hodges, and I'm not going to show the video here tonight for the sake of time, but I would encourage those of you who have time to go watch this video. It's from CBS Evening News. It's Steve Hartman on the road. It's a very heartfelt story about a young man in high school and how he showed great bravery, vulnerability to do something that he wasn't yet good at. And this is a quote from Gerald Hodges: "If I couldn't handle not being good at something, then how could I consider myself a successful person?" As we have a legacy of excellence and we do a lot of winning in Lovejoy ISD, which is absolutely amazing, along with that, we have to make sure that we create a culture and an atmosphere where it is safe for people to try new things and also be a beginner, because you cannot be excellent if you're also not willing at some point to be a beginner and be a learner. And this conversation was so important because within this strategic plan, there are many ambitious things that we will not be good at yet. It will be a journey, it will be a process on that way to excellence. We had an update from our Financial Sustainability Committee because if you will recall, we have our Lovejoy 2030 Committee, which has our different working groups, one of which is our Financial Sustainability Committee. The depth of their work is requiring them to work parallel and also meet a little bit more frequently, of course, than the Strategic Planning Committee. But we wanted to make sure that our Lovejoy 2030 Strategic Planning Committee had a deep and thorough update on where our FSC is at. So they received that on April 5th. You'll see here our different working groups again: teaching and learning, graduate profile, legacy of excellence, financial sustainability, operations, future ready, and talent acquisition, retention, and support. I wanted to lift up a conversation that we had on April 5th that is also critically important as we launch this strategic plan at the end of May, and that is culture. We've been having a conversation in regard to culture internally as a staff really since July. And this conversation is very much grounded in our core values. One heart, one Lovejoy, kids come first, and best today, better tomorrow. We're very proud of these core values, and we lift these up often, but the true test of how we're doing in regard to our core values is our daily actions and behaviors. In order to have a culture that really lives those things, we are very much focused on relationships, learning, collaboration, results, and fun. We know that relationships in a school district are the vehicle by which we accomplish all of our work. Nothing gets done without pairing positive relationships with each other. Learning is the top priority. That is why our organization exists. Our students need to be learning at high levels, and our professionals need to be learning at high levels. We also need to be in deep collaboration together. What we can accomplish together far exceeds what any of us can do individually, and through that collaboration, we can best serve our students. And then a results orientation, a focus on results rather than intentions. And you'll see that very much in our strategic plan through our key indicators. And then, of course, fun, because if we are not loving and enjoying what we're doing, then we're not going to do our best work. The importance of play and fun is scientifically proven in regard to its positive impact on productivity and effectiveness, morale, and culture. I have a little arrow on results because April 5th was really all about results. How are we going to measure our results towards our strategic targets? This, of course, is a picture of an iceberg. This is a picture that we have been using internally as we have conversations with our staff about culture. I believe only 13% of an iceberg is visible above the surface of the water. And that's surface culture. It's important, but it is only a small part of what we do. And that surface culture, of course, involves our mission, our vision, our goals, policies and procedures, the beautiful logos of our core values that I showed you earlier that were really great in the PowerPoint, incredible on some letterhead. But again, that doesn't really display our deep culture. Our deep culture involves our actions, our attitudes, our problem solving, our decision making. How do we work together when something gets hard or there's disagreement? That level of commitment, whether it's a good conversation or a challenging conversation, that we've got to figure out a challenge together. And I've been sharing a lot in regard to the importance of making sure that our surface culture deeply aligns with our deep culture as well. And we want to make sure that we're very transparent about that, and that we're talking about that, and that is showing up on a day-to-day basis in our actions and our leadership behavior. And finally, our key indicators, as I talked about, this is how we will measure our progress. So on these scorecards that you are going to see at the end of May, you will have strategic targets, which are our goals, where we want to go, strategies, which will be the actions that will get us there, and then our key indicators, which will communicate how we are going to measure our effectiveness or our progress towards implementation. They are going to help us track our progress, as I've said. They're going to assist us in defining success and also celebrating that success, which is important. Some of them will be quantitative, some of them will be qualitative. And this will identify the aspects of our organizational performance that it's most important to make sure that we are tracking and holding ourselves responsible for. You'll see here an example scorecard. This is just an example. This is not necessarily any content that will be in our actual strategic plan, but what you can expect from us at the end of May, as I've said, strategic targets, strategies, as well as key indicators. We also had some pretty incredible working group presentations. This was my favorite part of April 5th. Our working groups shared out. So we had staff members, parents, students that got up and shared their working group progress with all of us, shared their thinking and their collaboration. So we were so glad to hear from them. And what's next? You'll see here that our strategic plan is going to be a very important part of what we do. It's important to remember that this is Lovejoy 2030, so everything is not going to be implemented in year one, but we will identify those strategies on our plan that will move towards implementation, and then that will, of course, drive resource alignment and allocation. There will be planning, design development, of course, implementation and evaluation of progress, and that maintenance and adjustment process as we move through this cycle of continuous improvement. When we talk strategy to implementation, we want to put some safeguards in place, one of them being our district strategic plan. It will be launched here in the spring. That will be brought forward for your consideration in May. Then we have our district improvement plan that will be developed and shared with you in the fall of 2022, this coming fall, and then our campus improvement plans, which will follow. And all of those things will be strategically aligned so that we accomplish our goals. And you can see a complete list of safeguards here. So we'll present to you in May. And then we want to make sure that we align our district improvement plan with our strategic plan, as well as our campus improvement plans. We also will commit to an annual public report. And then also every other year, what we'll do is we'll actually come together as a strategic planning committee, not for 3 days, maybe for a day, come together, look and reflect upon our progress, and then also look to the future. Is there anything based on what our current context or current research that we need to fold into or modify our plan to make sure that we are continuing to stay current? And then, of course, we're going to implement a digital management platform internally for our process of holding ourselves responsible, and we'll put some structures in place that when we're coming together as a district leadership team, along with our campus leaders, to make sure that we keep this plan in front of us and make tracking that progress and adjusting if necessary a priority so that it doesn't end up in a drawer, if you will. This is our wonderful strategic planning committee, and I can tell you, you can have the best strategic planning process in the world. That does not matter if you do not have committed, enthusiastic, passionate people, and we definitely had that. And so impressed with their commitment and their love for Lovejoy ISD and our students. It was incredible to hear their ideas and get their thinking around the table. And so we are deeply grateful for them. We know that they have other places that they could spend their time, Their time is valuable, and investing 3 full days with us meant a great deal to us. So I would like to extend my deep gratitude to each and every one of them. And then we also have a list of them as well as the role that they serve on the committee as well, so that our community knows who's involved. Do you have any questions for me?
Comments, I will tell you, it was a well-ran process. I'm grateful for the work that you all put into it to make it go off well. Having come out of a process where we brought in a third-party consultant, paid a fee, this was light years ahead. And then just huge compliments to the students and the staff. Students were impressive, every one of them. It was fun to watch. And they really were good at thinking strategically. So anyway, appreciative of the process, excited to be through it, and certainly excited about the presentations and the substance. So it'll be great for the community to see the work as well.
I would echo what you said about our students. They were absolutely incredible. I'm going to consider them our secret ingredient.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I have no announcements tonight unless you do, Ms. Cordell. We're adjourned.